Good morning, class. Good morning, everybody. Are you there? Good morning. Roshan, good morning. Shilpi, good morning. Larma, good morning. Murtaza, good morning. Amrin, good morning. See, I have sent this one. See, I'm going to use the PowerPoint that I sent last time to complete the international trade theories. After that, I'm going to speak about something about how the gold standard came, what happened in the 1920s, and introduction to the situation of international financial situation, because I have to take international financial management as well as part of international business. So I'll be going into all that. That for that I have given you a PowerPoint just now. That one also will be useful. Okay. Pavan, good morning. Asha, good morning. Yashaswini, happiest morning to you. Vicky, good morning. Zulfati, good morning. Ahmed Fahim, good morning. I know Yashaswini. Zia, Rashid, good morning. Lily, good morning. From you, huh? Okay, okay. Merit, good morning, Merit. How are you? Okay. Yes, again, Yashaswini. Happiest morning to you. Ravi, good morning. Hadia, good morning. Farhan, good morning, Farhan. How are you? Bharat, good morning. Once again, Yashaswini, good morning. Amrita, good morning. Prashant, happiest morning to you too. Prashant, here's another smile for you. Mohan, good morning. Sandeep, good morning. Uh, Abash, good morning. Mahesh, good morning. Yeah, shall we start? As people come, they can come. We'll go ahead and start, right? 9, 10 already. Motherling, good morning, Motherling. Naresh, good morning. Barsha, good morning. Rose, good morning. Yeah. So we were talking about the why international business happens. So we have some theories. Some theories are based on. There are two types of theories, two classifications. Good morning, Naveen. For the theories, there are two classifications. The first classification is. I hope I'm loud and clear. Okay. The first classification is based on the countries, okay, and the second classification, Nasir, good morning, and the second classification is based on firms or companies. So we have done three theories, that is mercantilism and absolute theory of absolute advantage as per our you tell me who was that. Adam Smith, and then you had David Ricardo. Priksha, good morning. Bharti, good morning. So we had Adam Smith with the theory of absolute advantage. Then we had David Ricardo with his theory of relative advantage, and then we have to go into some other theories. Okay, now Hexer-Orlan theory. Here he says factors in relative abundance are cheaper. Now, see, for example, in India, our population is quite a large population. So, Lakshmi, good morning. Chandu, good morning. Devika, good morning. Hi, good morning. Okay. So, what happens is, see, in our country, we have a huge population. So, there is competition for work. Like laborers do not hold a monopoly as such. Okay, there is a competition. If you want a job done, there are instead of two people or one person, 10 people turn up. So naturally, the labor, demand, the law of demand and supply, because there is so much supply and there is less demand, labor becomes cheaper. Wilson, good morning. So labor becomes cheaper, for example. So what happens is, that's why when there is this factor, labor factor, driven, good morning. When this factor, labor factor, is in abundance, then the labor cost is less in our country. Laborers are paid relatively lesser than in other countries. All right, I'm not meaning all the countries, but relatively. So that is one thing. So suppose there is plenty of land, okay, land that is not used, then the land doesn't, and nobody wants it. Maybe it is arid land or something like that. Then what happens is land becomes cheaper, or any other factor of production. Suppose the OPEC was not formed, there were no commodity cartels. That is why you see commodity cartels are formed. Just because you have, what to say, lot of oil, you cannot allow it to become cheaper. Or just because you have lot of gold or diamonds, if you do not have a commodity cartel, you cannot control the price. See, but remember, commodity cartels are for the reason of two things. Not only no, two objectives commodity cartels are formed for. One is price, naturally. Second, very important, is the supply, controlling the supply, like Organization of Petrol Exporting Countries, OPEC. OPEC was formed in the 1960s, late 1960s, with the express purpose of course, controlling the price, and secondly, controlling the supply. See, what would have happened? Suppose OPEC had not controlled the supply, then countries would sell, like, just because people are demanding oil and they have oil, they would indiscriminately sell oil. Suppose country A has a lot of oil and country B doesn't have much oil, so country B keeps on buying oil. When you get this crude oil, so oil and gas and all. So when you get a lot of petrol or oil, that is crude oil, for use, what will country B do? It will start industrializing. Once it industrializes, what happens? It will have enough machinery, etc., etc., and it will start digging for its own oil. So country B will find its own oil. Once country B finds its own oil, why will it buy from country A? You understand? And then it will become, excuse me, it will become popular. You see, it will become a economic superpower. So thanks to the indiscriminate or uncontrolled supply of oil given by country A to country B. So that is why commodity cartels should not only control the price, they should also control the supply. You understand? I hope you understood. If you did not understand, why, what, Najim, good morning. Class, he's wishing the class also, so sweet. Yasser, good morning. Teja, good morning. Sabin, good morning. Mahadevi, good morning. Okay, excuse me. Okay, here we are. My nose will be fine, but when I start class, it starts itching. I don't know, every morning after I start class, my nose has to itch. Yeah. Okay, here we are. So we were in that Hecksler-Ohlin theory, where he says factors of production, if any factor of production is abundant in a country, then that factor of production become cheaper. Okay. uh, you don't say too much abundance, but relatively, if country A has more than country B, then we say country A has relatively more such a factor of production than country B. So it is relative, not necessarily that too much of supply. Okay. Then similar products might be produced by different methods. This is what he says. Overall input costs determine the efficiency. If country A can produce 1 unit of a product for 10 rupees and country B can produce for 20 rupees, then country A will definitely be, it is required to sell, and country B buy that product from country A. Similar to the comparative advantage and absolute advantage, but this is a little different based on the certain factors of production he is talking about. Okay, now come to the product life cycle, international product life cycle. See, this is very interesting. I'll explain to you. You see it afterwards. I'll explain to you like this. Let us take the United States. Excuse me. Let us say it invented the microwave. Hmm? It invented the United States. My example is like this. The United States invented the microwave. When it invented the microwave, it starts producing the microwave, and its own country will be buying the microwave. Also, let us say our country will start buying microwave, importing microwaves from America. Imagine. So what happens as some days and months and years go on? What happens in the United States? That microwave, which was a novelty, I'm sorry, just hold on, just hold on. Sorry, my dog came in through that door, and that dog was banging. I'm sorry. Okay, so where were we? Okay, the United States has invented a product, and that is the microwave. Now, what happened to the microwave? It is a new product. It's a novelty item, and the United States is manufacturing it. You know, so the people in the United States are buying it, and then other developing countries say, "I also want some microwaves. I yet have not yet manufactured it." So so United States exports these microwaves. Okay. Now let us say a country like India, for example. We can do reverse engineering. Reverse engineering means you take the microwave, you break it apart, and you know how to do it. And then what happens is, as time goes on, the patent also is doesn't matter. After some time, the patent loses its like value, and the time bound. There's something called time bound. Um, for the patent, after 20 years you cannot continue the patent. So for some products, books and all are for 60 years. So copyright for book is 60 years. So what happens is, as say the United States finds another product as a novelty item, and it says, I will not manufacture microwaves, I'll concentrate on buying manufacturing something else. By that time, what happens in India? These microwaves, they start manufacturing the microwaves. Okay, then as that microwave becomes a standard kind of product. It's no more a novelty product in the United States. In India also, becomes a standard product, not a novelty product. That time, United States will start manufacturing something else, and India will have already started manufacturing microwaves. India will start giving to all Indians, and then United States, there will be a demand. But since there will be some demand for microwaves, but still since United States had stopped manufacturing microwaves, India will export the same microwaves that they used to import to America. So America, which used to export microwaves to India, has stopped production because it has become a standard product, not a novelty product anymore. And to fulfill the demand that Americans want microwaves, it is importing from India. It was exporting to India first, now it is importing from India. So this is a cycle. This is the Hexler-Ohlin theory of how and why international business takes place. This is the product life cycle theory. All right. Ali Fardin, good morning. Chaitra, good morning. Anjali, good morning. Mallikarjun, good morning. Rima, good morning. Okay. So this is the product life cycle theory. Okay. Now there is one more theory called new trade theory. It is based on the direction of the Akarsh. Good morning. It is based on the direction of the government. Okay. So when there is excess capacity and resources, they are used. When you have large scale economies, production and production large scale economies are got because of large scale production. Yes, Manjunath, thank you. Abhishek, good morning. Good morning, Manjunath. Good morning, Abhishek. Thank you. So, see, new trade theory is like this. Sometimes a country starts manufacturing a particular product. It becomes an expert in manufacturing. It gets specialized in manufacturing. Also, it starts manufacturing in large numbers. When it manufactures in large numbers, it gets, see, instead of buying raw materials 100 units, when you buy 10,000 units, you get much, much cheaper. So your whole cost of production becomes cheaper. These are called economies of large scale production. So because of economies of large scale production, you manage to make per unit cost of production cheaper. That is why the product which is manufactured in your country is cheaper than the product that is manufactured in another country. So that is why you should manufacture and export rather than that country manufacture and export. Do you understand? This is another theory. So we ran into many theories. For country-based theories, I started with mercantilism. Then I went into Adam Smith's theory of absolute advantage. Shekhar, good morning. So yeah, we started with mercantilism. I'm talking about country-based theories. Mercantilism. Then we went into Adam Smith's theory of absolute advantage. Then we went into David Ricardo's theory of relative advantage. Then we went into Hecksler-Ohlin theory, where we have, the factors of production are plenty, relatively cheaper. That's why relatively cheaper. Then we have the trade cycle theory, product cycle theory, where I gave you the example of US and India microwaves. Then we have another theory, which was that man, I forgot. New trade theory. New trade theory, whereby you just acquire some specialization, or acquire, not inherent. See, some of these theories are based on inherent properties of having such a, already having, yeah, good morning, Shashikant. Shekhar, good morning. So, in some of these theories are based on inherent properties of having a lot of production factors of production, etc. But some theories here are acquired. Like you start manufacturing on your own and you become good. Kavya, good morning. You become good, etc. Like that. So these are the theories. And then last is relative factor endowments theory. This is similar to one no more theory that I did. Excuse me. So it is similar to one theory I just did, two theories before that. So you can go ahead with that. I will not go into this. Next, we'll go into modern firm-based theories. Firm-based theories. So far, I taught you about why countries deal with countries. Okay, so we were talking about the factor endowments of countries, inherent abilities, acquired abilities of production of countries, etc. Now we are talking about abilities of companies. Why companies in one country should deal with companies in another country. Okay, these are also these are firm-based theories. Now, firm-based theories explain the development of trade in differentiated consumer products. Why does the growth of MNCs happen? Okay. Now we'll go into first. You have the product life cycle theory. Okay, it is there. Then you have the global strategic rivalry theory. He says trade flows arising from global strategic rivalry between MNCs. Okay. Now, how does it? Firms struggle. See, everybody wants some strategic advantage, and each one has their own strategy. What to? For example, see, multinational corporations, say an American multinational corporation, let's say Procter and Gamble and Unilever, they manufacture a gamut of products. Okay, But when they come to some other country, say they come to some other country, say India, for example, they don't bring the whole gamut of products. They bring products that are suited for India only. All right, suited for India only. That is a strategy. When they go to a country like Japan, they will bring products that are suited for Japan only. That is a strategy. It's not necessary that they bring all their products to all the countries of operation. Whatever the products they sell in their domestic country, the country of origin, they need not bring all these products to all the countries that they are countries of operation. So understand this. The country of origin is where your country is, your headquarters is, and and you have started from, is the country of origin. Country of operation is where you're, operating naturally, where you're selling your product, or you may manufacture the product, etc. I told you, multinational corporation means you manufacture in one country and sell in several countries. Transnational corporation means you manufacture in several countries and you sell in several countries. Even your headquarters may be in more than one. You may have head office in one country, and you may have your HRM training in another country. You may have production in several countries. So there it is. A transnational. You don't know where they originated from. So much is the spread all over the world. So that's the difference between an MNC and a transnational. Transnational also manufactures in more than one country. Okay, there may be, I think Ford manufactures cars in for four different countries and assembles in a fifth country in the in the European Union. Okay, so now we come to Paul Krugman and Kevin Lancaster, their theories. They say firms struggle to gain some competitive advantage. What is a sustainable competitive advantage? What do you mean by sustainable competitive advantage? You understand the word sustainable. It has to last for a long time. Competitive advantage means you are better than others. Okay, in that particular product manufacturing and selling, or the whole package like price, etc., etc., you are better than the others. Okay, so here they talk about owning intellectual property rights. Sometimes you have some intellectual property rights. You have Hanumesh, good morning. So you have some Soumya, good morning. Yeah. So you have some intellectual property rights, IPRs, patents, copyrights, trademarks, etc. So these give you some competitive advantage. Then investing in research and development. Many firms invest in research and development so that they keep on developing products. Okay. Then you have achieving economies of scale or scope. That I told you. Scope means widen. That scope is within a certain framework. So the framework itself is widening. You, instead of see, for example, you have ITC. ITC was only manufacturing cigarettes and such products. Now you have they have widened their scope. They're widely. They even eating stuff like biscuits and wheat flour and all that. And then you have from ITC, even ITC has gone into information technology. There is apparel, there is ready to eat food, and heat and eat stuff. All this, okay. So exploiting, then next is exploiting the experience curve. See, experience is something that gives you, helps you not to make mistakes. See, I was watching Shark Tank the other day for a while. Excuse me. You know what is Shark Tank, no? Some people who have been very successful in business, very means extremely, they're talking, they will sit as a team, and whoever has a new business idea can go there and tell them, see, I require so much of investment. If you invest so much money in my business, I will give you so much. Naveen, good morning. I will give you so much percentage of ownership for you. So would you be interested? And they tell the business idea. So there was this husband and wife couple who wanted to sell pizza in the form of cupcakes, frozen food. So there was a lady who was already selling something else in for frozen foods, and she offered them. So offered them the money, but this lady said 5%. The person who brought the business said, if you give me 1,25,000 million something dollars or something like that, I will give you 5% of the business. But the lady who was offering said, give me 25%, I'll give you that much money, give me 25%. So they were saying what I'm going to bring to the table, what you're going to bring to the table, etc., etc. So then after that, as they were going back and forth, the lady said, the Shark Tank lady who was sitting in the panel said, see, I can bring to you one important thing. I can help you not make 2 years of mistakes. So suppose you go and sell by a particular strategy, and that strategy is not appreciated. Already you have lost 2 years of good sales. Then you have to change your strategy. So she's saying, my experience will help you not to do 2 years of mistakes. You see, so experience is something. So that is why the last thing in this slide you see is riding the experience curve. Lessons learned. Once you know the riding, exploiting the experience curve. You've done that. You've burnt your hands there. You know why you burnt your hands, and so you know that I will not burn my hands again if I don't do this. You understand? So Nagma, good morning. So, Maiwan, good morning. Maiwan, help Rashid. Maiwan, I've sent something. I want some help, okay? Maiwan, after class, just call me when you're free, when you do not have class. Rashid will tell you what I have asked you to do. Okay? Now, there is one lovely theory here called Michael Porter's theory. Okay? We call it Michael Porter's diamond. This is based on some factor conditions. He says success in international trade comes from interaction of four country specific and firm specific elements. He says international trade is based on four elements. The first one is factor conditions. Thanks, Mama. The first one is factor conditions, like what are the factors of production you have in your country. Then next is related and supporting industries. Say I gave you the example of India as a manufacturing hub. When foreign car manufacturers came into India, as I told you, all the parts of a car are not manufactured by the original manufacturer. There are some supporting industries, related and supporting industries that manufacture parts of the car, and these parts go into the original car. Okay, all the parts of a car are not manufactured by the manufacturer. But if I say Toyota, all the parts of the Toyota car are not manufactured by Toyota. All the parts of the Ford are not manufactured by Ford company. Like windscreen will come from somebody else. These are accessories which matter, but really don't matter in the performance of the car. They matter in the aesthetics, maybe the fenders, the lights, floodlights, the fog lights, the rear view mirrors. Tejas, good morning. The rear view mirrors, and maybe seat covers, the seats themselves, all this, or the some plastic parts of the car. All these are manufactured by related and supporting industries. Okay, so